Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Joanna Ho. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. The High Court approves a prosecution request to adjourn Jimmy Lai's national security trial. 2 former flight attendants sentenced to 8 weeks in prison for flouting quarantine rules. And health authorities stick to existing curbs despite the city recording more than 10,000 COVID infections. The High Court has granted a request to adjourn the trial of Jimmy Lai after the government wanted Beijing to clarify whether overseas lawyers can take part in national security cases. British counsel Tim Owen was also absent today as the defense revealed the Immigration Department refused to extend his visa. Janice Low reports.
Security was extra tight this morning outside the High Court, where Jimmy Lai was due to make another appearance on his national security case. Police officers wielding automatic rifles were seen standing guard at the court's entrance as a prison van carrying the 74-year-old arrived. His wife and daughter were also present at the hearing. Lai, along with 3 companies linked to the now-defunct Apple Daily newspaper, are charged with conspiring to collude with foreign forces as well as publishing seditious materials. The 30-day trial was scheduled to begin today, but the Department of Justice requested proceedings be adjourned for 7 days pending an interpretation from Beijing on whether foreign lawyers can participate in national security cases. The defense raised no objection. 3 judges approved the prosecution's request and decided reconvene on December 13. But it remains unknown when the National People's Congress Standing Committee will respond to the SAR government's request to clarify the security legislation. Judge Alex Lee expressed concern that further delays could constitute an unfair hearing for Lai, but the prosecution was hopeful the matter will be resolved soon. Lai was represented by senior counsel Robert Pang today, while Tim Owen was absent. The defense refuted that the Immigration Department refused to extend the visa of the King's Counsel from London. As a high-profile case which has garnered international attention, the judiciary has allocated over 200 seats for public attendees, significantly more than the usual quota. Janice Low, HKIBC.
2 Cathay Pacific flight attendants have been jailed for 8 weeks each for breaching medical surveillance rules on their return to Hong Kong last year. They had left their residences before completing 3 days of quarantine, causing the Omicron variant to spread in the community. 2 weeks after they were remanded, it was time for Wong Yun Long and Nelson Lau to find out their sentences at Eastern Magistracy. The former Cathay Pacific flight attendants were convicted last month for flouting medical surveillance rules tailor-made for aircrew. Under prevailing rules last year, the pair had to serve 3 days of home quarantine upon returning to the city and could only step out for essential activities. But Lau dined with his family at a restaurant in Kowloon Tong, while Wong left his residence to visit Lau. Both were later found to have contracted COVID, and their actions sparked one of the earliest Omicron clusters at the onset of the 5th wave. Pleading for leniency today, defense counsel James McGowan said the 2 men had lost everything, including their jobs, and it seems impossible for them to work in the same field again. McGowan blamed Cathay for not giving clear guidelines to staff, arguing his clients were unaware they had breached any rule. He asked for a lesser sentence, considering they had already been remanded for 2 weeks. But the prosecution objected and questioned if the defendants had shown remorse about their actions since they claimed to be victims. Magistrate Edward Wong slammed the duo for spreading the virus to at least 9 people, as well as abusing privileges granted to aviation workers at a time when most arrivals had to serve longer quarantine at isolation facilities. But considering they had lost their jobs, he deducted 1 week of their 9-week prison terms. Health authorities said the current social distancing measures will remain after COVID cases exceeded 10,000 for the first time in nearly 3 months. There were another 10,137 cases in the past 24 hours. Only 606 were imported, meaning the surge came from local infections. Officials also noted rising flu infections in the Northern Hemisphere and urged the elderly and children to get COVID and flu jabs ahead of the winter peak. The number of deaths have also jumped by 47% on a week-to-week basis.
Increase in death cases recorded in the past 1 to 2 weeks reflects the situation the increase starting in mid-November.
Patient after having the COVID come to the hospital or seek medical advice is a bit delayed. Hopefully, the patients can actually seek help as early as possible. This is probably one of the reasons why we can see a surge of death. People still actually do not like going to hospital, do not like to see doctors. This is quite a common phenomenon.
Chief Executive John Lee were among top officials paying their tributes to former President Jiang Zemin this afternoon. Flags were flying at half-mast at the liaison office and other government complexes. A memorial hall was set up there for the public to mourn Jiang, who passed away yesterday. John Lee, his top ministers, and other political heavyweights, such as former chief executives Leung Chun-ying and Carrie Lam, had paid their respect by bowing to a portrait of Jiang. Outside the office, people lined up to lay flowers to express their condolences. The hall will open daily until Tuesday, when a commemoration ceremony will take place in Beijing. People must book their visits in advance and prove they are COVID negative. 2 men were killed after a fire broke out at a Wan Chai flat in the small hours of this morning. Firefighters suspect foul play was involved, while sharp cuts were found on the bodies of the deceased. Macy Mok reports.
Firefighters rushed to Camlock Mansion near the junction of Lockhart and Stewart Road after 3 a.m. A video by a witness showed raging flames had engulfed a residential unit on the 6th floor, while thick black smoke found its way up. The blaze was extinguished in 1 hour. A man pulled out from the scene was placed on a stretcher as medics tried to resuscitate him with a machine. He was one of 2 men rescued from the flat. One of them was an 89-year-old resident who was found in the flat's bedroom. His body was charred and a 2-centimeter-long wound caused by a sharp object was on the chest. The other man, who is believed to be his relative, was sent to Rattanji Hospital and subsequently certified around 6 a.m. He also had a 1-centimeter wound near his chest. Wan Chai District Superintendent Sin Kwok Ming said police are still investigating the actual cause of their deaths and their relationship. While there are no obvious signs the duo had quarreled beforehand, more confirmation was needed. The Fire Services Department suspected foul play was involved as 2 cans of fire accelerants were found at the burning flat. But police did not rule out the possibility of an accident and called on the building's residents to provide additional information. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
Turning overseas, the world's largest volcano, Mauna Loa, continued oozing lava days after waking up for the first time in nearly 4 decades. Despite the potential danger, the scenes on the Hawaiian island have drawn thousands of awestruck viewers. Asam Khan reports.
It was a sight to behold. Lava continued to spew from the summit of Mauna Loa, the world's largest volcano, after awaking from its 38-year slumber on Sunday. The United States Geological Survey said that the eruption propelled lava up to 45 meters high. While residents and property were not at immediate risk, the flowing lava is slowly creeping towards highways. Ken Han from the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory said the lava could reach the roads in a few days.
And this flow right now is about 3.5 miles or so from the highway. It is slowed down appreciably today. Last night it was making over 100 yards an hour, and it slowed down to about 30 yards an hour later this afternoon. We expect this flow to keep going. Most Mauna Loa flows like this last for 2 to 3 weeks.
Police struggled to shoo away hordes of tourists and locals alike who wanted to catch a glimpse of the epic scenes.
Oh, there's a lot of fear and trepidation if you get really close to it. You just go up to the craters and look into it. It's powerful. The closer you get, the more powerful it is and the scary it is.
The eruption temporarily knocked off power to the world's premier station that reads carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the federal government is considering flying in a generator to the site. Azam Khan, HKIBC.
French President Emmanuel Macron said France and the United States must work together to fight climate change. He addressed U.S. lawmakers at Washington as part of his state visit.
One of the key elements of our strategy as well is to help the emerging countries to get rid of coal and to reduce like crazy their exposure to coal. To go to gas, nuclear, renewables, and progressively to get rid of gas and to go to nuclear, renewables, and efficiency, which are the three relevant pillars of our strategy, and I think we are very much aligned on that. We have to go to carbon neutrality 2050. We have to reduce and respect our commitments for 2030, which means a lot of reforms, a lot of involvement of public and private sectors, and a lot of investment and public money, let's be clear, in order to deliver this big change.
Macron also shared a dinner table with U.S. President Joe Biden. The two leaders will formally meet at the White House to discuss a range of matters, including Ukraine and trade. Hong Kong stocks climbed to an almost 3-month high on the first day of the month. The Hang Seng Index edged 0.75% up on optimism of China relaxing COVID restrictions and the U.S. Federal Reserve signaling a slower rate hike. Chow Tai Fook made a strong resurgence with a 5.7% gain. The jeweler reported an uptick in revenue following losses in the 6 months ending September. Bourse operator Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing and Alibaba kicked off the holiday season with 3.6% rallies. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed up 139 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent was up $7.20, Meituan down 60 cents. BYD Company up $2, Kuaishou up $1.15. To the forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, euros at 8.13, pounds at 9.48, and Australian dollar at 5.3. Over to the UK market, FTSE 100 is up 6 points. The U.S. Federal Reserve will continue to raise its key interest rate to tamp down inflation, although the upcoming adjustment could be lower than the past 4 hikes of 75 basis points. Chairman Jerome Powell also indicated it will be some time before the policy will be loosened.
Given our progress in tightening policy, the timing of that moderation is far less significant than the questions of how much further we will need to raise rates to control inflation and the length of time it will be necessary to hold policy at a restrictive level. It will take substantially more evidence to give comfort that inflation is actually declining, and by any standard, inflation remains far too high.
On to the weather now. The cold snap will continue with sunny intervals tomorrow. Temperatures will range between 13 and 18 degrees. The mercury will rise progressively over the weekend. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Thursday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Joanna Ho. Thanks for watching. Good night.